Dov, welcome to the show, which is not an interview.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, and welcome to the show as well. Like I wanted, in fact, I had this talk with you already. I don't know how many times. Like, since I contacted you and said that I want to talk, I had a lot of iterations about this, and every time it's totally different. So
Nice.
yeah.
So you were on the show on episode, what was it, 113 or something like that?
Maybe.
Yeah. Talking about Tao in facilitation and agile.
I guess, yeah, it sounds like me.
Yes. What would you like to talk about today?
Yeah,
You made it explicit that you don't want it to be an interview.
Yes. So I don't really know. So when I said, let's talk, I had a very clear topic, which is after I heard one of your episodes, I realized that I didn't hear all the episodes already. I apologize for this. I realized that we talk a lot about facilitation, and we don't look at this thing that we are facilitating. Do we see this thing that requires, can be addressed by, there is a space for it to be facilitated? Why is it asking that? Is it one thing or that? So that was the topic. The thing is that since that was a topic burning in me, sort of, when I proposed this interview, or non-interview, or a double interview, whatever you want to call it. And since then, the volume of this went down, and I became more and more curious about you, about like what, yeah, like I heard a lot of people that you interview, and for me, you are centralizing a community. You have, I don't know what else you do in life, but a big part of our interaction is because you are the grain of dust around which this snowflake of the community is born. And I wanted to understand what's in it for you, like what drives you there. And also, since we scheduled this interview, I think you postponed twice because you were overloaded. And I wanted to understand also how much energy does it take? How much energy does it give regarding you? So this was one iteration of this talk. So this is what I wanted to talk about halfway between when I said, let's talk, and now. And today, I don't know, like I would love this to be really an emerging talk. So that's the long answer for the short question.
Where shall we start? At the beginning? So how can we facilitate this conversation? And my question to your question would be, is there anything that we cannot facilitate? Because yes, we are talking a lot about the tool or the art and craft of facilitation. And I believe, and maybe I'm either naive or just a nerd, I think we can facilitate anything. And I think we can facilitate conversations, obviously, but also learning. We can facilitate relationships. We can even facilitate ourselves. So how can we make it easy? By structuring the process, listening more, pausing more, sensing more.
So now that you asked this, this is where the first topic I wanted to talk about comes into being. How do you know that you facilitate well? Perhaps the way to facilitate a conversation is to cut someone mid-sentence. Perhaps it's to be silent. Perhaps it's to show very, very big disrespect. All of these will lead somewhere. To facilitate assumes that this thing, and we didn't touch about on what this thing is, that it needs to go somewhere. And intentionally I say needs and not wants, because you know, we all want to be lazy, and we all need, quote unquote, to challenge ourselves. So
what if it was the other way around, that we want to challenge ourselves, but we need to be lazy?
yeah, and that's the other point. So how do we know? I'll do it differently. To know that we facilitate well, we have to understand this thing that we facilitate and connect to it.
And I wonder how much we actually need to know. And a session that comes to my mind immediately is Rebecca Sassen's workshop. I think it was last week. And we spoke about boundaries. What is fixed and what is flexible? And what I admire in her is the ability to incorporate nimble facilitation. So to define a topic that we're going to talk about, and then let things emerge. So there is no outcome, there's no goal. So what are we facilitating? The conversation. How? With whatever emerges that would help. And sometimes, as you say, it is silence that helps to make it easier to find common knowledge or common understanding. Sometimes it's a provocation that might be needed to make understanding easier. And the provocation can be by interrupting someone or by showing disrespect.
But even here you said what will help to reach a common understanding, assuming that common understanding is the goal of the facilitation. So you already assume that there is a goal for the facilitation.
Good one. For me, well, a conversation without understanding is a dialogue des sourds. So you can speak about your topic and I speak about my topic. So for instance, if you continue to speak about, the meaning of facilitation, and I start answering the second part of your questions, and I start talking about myself, then yes, might be a piece of art, but we are not talking with each other, to each other. So I think a common understanding is a goal when two or more individuals join the same space to share time with each other.
Yeah. So hold on, I have one distractor that I didn't handle, which is my phone. And now I have to turn it off. And perhaps this is part of the, you know, of the facilitation. You know, the phone is part of our conversation.
Or the distracted, to what extent doesn't have to be facilitated or left out?
Yeah. Or perhaps it wanted to join the conversation as well.
Maybe.
Who knows? Okay. So when you say this, you say, we want to facilitate our conversation, and to facilitate it means we need to feel that we understand each other more, or we have a rapport, right?
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps the dissonance of misunderstanding will be more interesting for the people who hear this, if anyone will ever hear this. Okay, so are we facilitating the conversation, or are we facilitating the bigger thing that this conversation is part of?
Mm. And it depends. So I would think that me in the role as a podcast host, I have the understanding that my facilitation means to get the best out of you. So how can I ask questions or create the environment so that you can show up as the best version of yourself, so that you create value for the audience? And for me, this is part of facilitation. So if I would start interrupting you or start speaking only about myself or making you small, this doesn't help. This doesn't make it easy for you to show up as the best version of yourself, and hence not providing value to the audience.
Okay, maybe. Okay. I'm not sure that, in fact, what I would like to see is a facilitation without assumption of a predefined goal. And what you're talking about here is, this is my personal goal, and I'm facilitating whoever is around me to go in the direction that I envision. Does it make sense?
Yes. Yes. Although yes, if I'm very honest, I do envision a direction that is linked to the audience and the purpose of the podcast.
Okay.
Mm.
Only, like, if we go just one level, I don't know, above or higher or lower, I don't know the direction, the facilitation is not for you. The facilitation is for this thing that called the conversation. Mm-hmm. And you assume a role that presumes what is the best interest of this thing that is in this space.
Yeah, the purpose.
And by assuming it, you put, if I go to the extreme, you impose your intention on this thing that is just born, instead of letting it grow where it wants.
And it's an interesting point. And yes, this leads me to the thought that facilitation is possible only around a purpose.
A purpose, you mean a predefined purpose?
A predefined purpose. So for instance, when I went to an ecstatic dancing event, an ecstatic dance is facilitated. So there's someone who would welcome the group, and there's a little bit of a meditation onboarding where everyone joins, and it's facilitated in order to, around the purpose of non-judgmental dancing. If the participants wouldn't come there to dance, there's nothing to facilitate.
Yeah, but if the facilitators, all the facilitators who came there to dance now are around, and there comes into the room the cutest cat in the world, and everyone just starts playing with the cat instead of dancing.
Maybe that's a dance. If
there happens something else that has no movement in it, mm-hmm. but has the will of the group to go there, was it worth it to insist that, hey, we're here to dance, not to do this activity?
Mm. And I think that's maybe the other part of facilitation, is to sometimes the only part of facilitation you can do is to hold the space. And I'm a big fan of lazy facilitation. The less we do, the more impact we have sometimes. And facilitation is always around a purpose, and it's to be in service of the group. So yeah, if the purpose was to dance, but then the group believes that the best thing to do is to sit still, then holding the space to allow for that is facilitation.
Awesome. So I have a thought about this. As I get older, I find that I intervene less and less, and I hold the space, what you call, to a bigger and bigger scope. And if I take this to the extreme, I do nothing for the universe. So as a facilitator, I'm totally passive. I don't do anything. And my facilitation is not for a person or the group or the group of groups, but for the whole Tao, if you want, like the whole, this whole one being. Okay, so and again, like if we go to the Tao that that I like, there is this concept of Wu Wei, of doing without doing, and the more you learn to do by intention without any action, the more it's effective, which I think we find intuitive. But and if I take it to the extreme, and that touches the topic that I wanted to examine. Facilitation is doing nothing for the whole thing, because this group of dance is part of a larger thing. And you might give this larger thing value by listening, not what the people who want to dance want to do, they want to dance, but to listen to what is this ecosystem where they live wants as an ecosystem. But this ecosystem is part of a larger one, and larger, and no, infinite, like babushkas, if you want, even more complicated. And what I wanted to do in the initial part, like when I initiated this talk, is to try to take a look at this thing that we are facilitating.
Which leads me to two questions or observation. One is, from what you describe, would you then say that a Buddhist monk who sits and meditates for the bigger course of the universe, or maybe just their own purpose of reaching the nirvana, are they facilitating anything? One question. And the other one is maybe a little bit more provocative. If we're doing, but not by not doing anything. So it's, for me, it would be a state of being. Who is there to tell us that this is in service of a higher cause? Yeah. So how do I know whether it is for the best of something bigger? Is it my intuition? Is this enough? Who am I to judge? And who is defining that? Who's giving us permission? Maybe we don't need permission, because if we're not interfering, we're not harming. But what if someone is harming with the same kind of excuses?
You'll have to remind me the two questions. I'll try to answer both of them. One
is the monk. Is a monk a facilitator, okay, but because they are not doing anything.
Awesome. And that goes into the deception of words. Depends what you call a facilitator, and if you take a close look at the word facilitator, just like any other word, it disintegrates. The closer you look, the less you understand. And for me, at some level, yes, a monk facilitates now if we understand what facilitate means. And that's what I wanted to say. There is a saying that I remember from way back. If God now came to you and told you what, let's say he, for the sake of, it wants you to do, you'd be happy doing it, whatever it was. What you're doing now is what God wants you to do. So be happy. Okay. So in this point of view, whatever happens is perfect. When we see imperfection, it's because our view is tainted, not because what we see is not perfect.
Because it is perfect from maybe any other perspective. So who are we to judge that it's imperfect? Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is as to have perfection or imperfection. You have to have an observer. There is no objective observer. There was God in this small story, but in fact, the observer is the universe, and the thing to be facilitated is the universe. So yes, so it's perfect, and this answers both questions. Okay, so by assuming that something is not perfect and trying to push it into perfection, be it a push, a nudge, or an intention, you impose a point of view on the world. Now, in this point of view, if we say that the universe is always perfect, it will be perfect also after your nudge. It's okay, don't worry about it. You can't ruin anything, right? But, and before you facilitate, at least me, I love to try and connect to this entity that quote unquote, because we said already no need for service, but in service of, to clean the intention that I have, or to have a very clear intention. So my goal is now to make an interview that I am happy with. This is my facilitation now comes from totally inside. I own where this conversation is going. I assume what my listeners want. My goal is to make my facilitators get what they want, my listeners, sorry. So I assume I know what my listeners want. I take ownership on giving them what I assume they want. And so I drive this thing to exactly that purpose, and fuck you. Fuck you, the person on the other side, and fuck you, the conversation that doesn't care about the listeners. Okay, so that's and I'm provocative on purpose, but
and that's absolutely fine. And I also agree. I think it's, for me, being in service and having our audience in mind must not contradict the aim of being true to ourselves and trying to have a good time. So for instance, I always have exploration calls with my future guests before I invite them on the show. And the exploration call is not about, or very little about, content, because who am I to judge whether they're good enough for the show? It's purely about chemistry. Am I getting along with this person? Do I have the impression that I can hold up a 40 minutes conversation or longer? Staying curious. And if it's a no, then this person is not coming on my show. So it's very egotistic, and still with my audience in mind, because I know that if I'm not interested, then how can I facilitate a conversation that is of any value or entertaining, or hopefully both? So yes, fuck them all. Absolutely. I agree. On the other hand, accepting that everything is perfect, and well, I think there's a distinction to make between accepting that everything is perfect as it is, because in the broader sense of a universe, it doesn't matter anyway, must not mean that we have to accept everything just because it is perfect as it is. So if I'm feeling miserable, I can intellectually accept that my misery is a perfect state because it couldn't be different at this point in time. So I better embrace it. Does it mean that I don't want to change anything about it? No, because any action would be perfect. Any action that I'm taking in order to get myself out of misery in the line of arguing that you're using will be perfect because it's the only thing that I can do.
Not because it's the only thing that you can do. Like, when you say perfection, again, this perfect implies a viewer. So there's no perfect. There's perfect in your eyes.
Or in the eyes
There's
of
perfect in the group's eyes. There's perfect in if you want, the universe's eyes. Like if
that's what I
we
mean.
feel it
Mm-hmm.
like an onion. But like every time I say but, I hesitate. You see. So
Recognize that.
if you help someone and don't recognize help, I don't know, facility, whatever. If you touch something and you don't recognize, take ownership, take responsibility is a better word, for the ripples that it makes outward, then you're not fully facilitating. So you know, like
If you're not taking responsibility, you mean, or if you are
yes,
taking responsibility?
no, if you're not, if you touch one apple, if you take one apple out of the pile of apples in the store and you don't realize that all the rest will now move,
mm-hmm.
then something is lacking.
Mm-hmm.
And if they will move, they will also move a lot of other things, by the way, right? So there will be noise, and perhaps one will fall, and perhaps someone will get to pick it, and there will be a chain of events.
Butterfly effect.
Let's call it the apple effect for this, for the sake of this one. So what I'm saying is that when we facilitate, it is interesting to look way beyond or bigger than the thing that we facilitate, to take responsibility. And I you know, I love the word responsibility. I'll tell you in a minute. Take responsibility for all of the effects that anything that we do has. And the reason I like the word responsibility, I'll say it again, I think I told you in the last time we talked, is because there's a friend of mine who taught me responsibility is the ability to respond. So responsibility means the ability to change something, right? So if now the example, we sit in a room and it's hot, it's the responsibility of everyone who can get up and touch the thermostat. It's not the responsibility of the thermostat manager. I don't know what. Yeah. Okay. So if you can do anything, even a small thing for the sake of something, you're responsible for it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and in this sense, for us as quote unquote facilitators, we are responsible for the ripples that we make.
And then,
and the smaller the ripples, I feel the the more lasting they are.
What do you mean?
It's again the idea of the Wu Wei, like slowly, as you said before, currently I became a passive facilitator, not only to save my energy, but mainly because I see that it works. That it works much better than if I say, now everyone do this and we have 5 minutes and do it. No, say, okay, so what happens now?
A few things to unpack. One is to come back to the responsibility. Is how far does it reach? So for instance, butterfly effect, or apple effect, I'm taking this apple. I am responsible of the effects that I can foresee. Am I still responsible of an effect that is maybe the 100th order, that might be a pure coincidence, bad luck, or destiny? So where does are good intentions enough? That would be question number one. Question number two is about the passive facilitator. You're saying this assuming that facilitation means doing something. So I believe that by not doing something, so you're taking a decision whether you act or you don't act. It's both a decision and it both has an impact and a ripple effect.
You can't not act. Just by being, you act.
Exactly. That's what I mean. So by deciding not to give time limits or not to interrupt or interact with the group, your presence is still having an effect.
Yeah.
So it's not that you're doing nothing. You're doing a lot.
So one by one. First of all, you said, and you'll remind me because you have a better memory than me. Okay, so you said 3 words or 3 that I noted because I love it. You said coincidence, bad luck, and destiny.
Mm.
In the world that we are talking about now, none exists. Okay, there is no, everything is a coincidence or nothing is a coincidence. There is none.
So how does it tie into responsibility then?
Yeah.
How can I take responsibility or hold responsibility if I cannot foresee what's happening?
Yeah. By being in touch with what's happening as it happens. Like if now I knock the bottle off the table, I see that I knock it off, and I automatically, or like I am one with the bottle, and when it falls, I catch it, or I let it go as an intention. I let it go by a decision, if you want. Okay, so when I take the apple, I don't cease to exist. When I take the apple, I'm still there. And when the apples start rolling, I can either block them or not block them. And if they fell on the floor, I can either apologize to the store owner or run from the store, whatever. I'm still there. I'm still in touch with the butterfly effect. Right? And the wider view I have, the more I see the interconnections. Okay, when the apple that fell to the floor made noise, someone behind me jumped. I can respond to that, right? I can respond to the apple. I have I'm in contact with the ripples that come out of my constant actions.
And coming back to the responsibility, the apple falls and kills a mouse. I don't see that. And
an ant, let's say.
And an ant. And the dog of my best friend eats the dead cat, dead mouse, and therefore dies as well.
Okay, yes.
Is it my responsibility?
In the definition that I have, yes. It's not your accountability, which is a word that I hate, by the way. But it is your responsibility. Yeah. You know what?
What does it then mean? So what does responsibility then mean?
Okay. Responsibility is the ability to respond to something at the moment, not in the future, right? So you know what? Perhaps it's not your responsibility. If the dog died, it's not your responsibility, because once the dog ate the poisoned mouse, now you're not responsible, because you don't know, you have no way to prevent this death. So you could respond to what happened before, but now that the dog ate it, you're not responsible for it.
This makes sense.
Okay. And so what I want to say, our actions are not a point, are not a second, they are not how do you say it? Are not sliced in time. How do you say? Like they're consecutive. We dance with reality. We are part of reality. We dance in it. It's not like I hit something and then, okay, that's it. I'm still there. So if we go back to this thing called facilitation, yes, you are responsible for the waves that happen, if you can respond to the waves that happen. But what I intend to do is, at least, and this I think is a prerequisite to respond, to be aware of the waves that happen, to be aware that now that this team is more proactive, it creates a dissonance between this team that I trained and the ecosystem it goes back to. Okay,
and that's your responsibility.
It's my responsibility if I'm still there, right? If I am still in that ecosystem, or if I choose to be, because perhaps I want to check in on this group. Part of what I facilitate is that after this workshop, I will check in on them. And part of my responsibility, by the way, is also to say, the thing that we did here, this distinct in time, I still can't find the word, event which I facilitated, isn't born in a vacuum. It may have impact on the participants, right? It may put some participants in stress, I don't know what, or make some participant decide that, in fact, they want to now stop doing this job and change their career. It can have an impact on the group. It can have impact on their families, because perhaps you asked them to stay 1 hour late, and they, I don't know, they had commitments and they, no, I don't know what. The impact is beyond the elusively isolated thing that you facilitate, and at least I want to widen my view enough to see what can ripple.
Yes. And I think this shows the complexity, because there is the immediate effect. So obviously, through facilitation and group session, we want to impact. That's why we were called in the first place. So just because we left, so we facilitate a session, and then what you said is, it has an impact of a team, and then it creates a dissonance to the rest of the organization, potentially. And I believe that this is your responsibility as a facilitator to prepare the team for that and to foresee that, even if you're leaving right after. Because I think that's part of the preparation, and it's almost disrespectful or dangerous, I think, to create impact for a team and then basically let them run into the next disaster because you have created this dissonance, or in part you have facilitated the dissonance. Yeah. On the other hand, what might happen, and we had this within the NDB community, where a very simple exercise triggered someone's trauma. Are we responsible for that as facilitators?
I don't know. Again, I don't know what it means as facilitators. Are we responsible for that?
Full stop. Yeah. Are we responsible for someone's inner reaction to outer circumstances?
If we can respond to it, we are responsible.
So the moment that they take ownership and voice it, and they say that something happened, we are responsible. So we have to respond.
First of all, response able means you're able to respond, and not that you have to respond.
Mm-hmm. Good one.
But the second thing is the moment that you sense that something happened, not the moment that they voiced it. Perhaps they didn't even see it. And this is what I mean, open your senses. You have, when you say a word, how wide is your view to detect that something changed? By the way, something always changes, right? Mm-hmm. Every word changes something. But how open are your ears, heart, whatever, your eyes, whatever you want to say, to sense that whatever happened, by the way, it doesn't have to be something you said, something that's one person said, or even something. you don't know what. Suddenly something happened and you sense it. And that's where I said before, if you are one with the thing, then when the apple falls, your body knows how to pick it up. You don't say, wait a minute, the apple is falling. Okay, what do I have to do? It was the book of apples. You open your mind and you try to pick it up. Too late. You are one with the apple, right? So you do the right thing when the apple falls.
And then what is the right thing? Because what I hear is, yes, you become one and your body and mind intuitively tells you what to do. So maybe there's no right or wrong, but the way you respond to a situation has, again, impact.
Of course.
So if I am a person who's maybe highly sensitive, so I sense every reaction of every participant in a room, then it is my decision on which one I react or I don't react. Otherwise, I might create more chaos because no one else than me senses what I sense.
And
on the other hand,
wait. And if the universe is perfect, who cares?
Who cares about me creating chaos for the group and thereby more dissonance and maybe more trauma, or me not doing anything? So either maybe everyone cares, maybe nobody cares. If we zoom out, nobody cares for sure. If we zoom in, we see all the complexity.
Yes. And if we are, I think, in fact, I'll deviate a little bit, okay? For me, the best response to anything is acceptance. So if there is someone who is triggered now, I don't know. Imagine I had this in one of my in quite a few, by the way, of my drawing meetups. Someone started crying, like out of nowhere, really. The best thing for me to do is to say, it's okay. There is space there to cry. There was the Will Smith thing now, right? You know, the famous, it's okay for him to hit him. As much as it is okay for him not to hit him. Like it is okay because now it happened, and now you can't go back and fix that, right? And saying what you are now is not okay. I'll use a new word in our dialogue, blocks the flow.
This means that every ex post judgment blocks the flow. What if he didn't hit him but shot him?
Yeah, it's the, so let's go to Taoism for a second.
Just one second, and yeah, just a clarification. Are you referring to the judgment, judging this was okay or this was not okay, or are you referring to an action? So he is hurting someone and thereby is judged or punished.
I don't connect to the word punish, but let's see where it's going. Yes.
I mean, I think lots of our legal system is based on a concept of punishment.
Yeah. And we know how well it works.
And I don't want to judge whether it's a good system or not, but that's a fact. Yes. So it's not based on the belief that someone goes to prison with the aim that they will be rehabilitated, but they're sent to prison as a punishment.
For me, no, by the way, but we're totally deviating. They're sent to prison as a deterrent for others not to do the same. They're sent to prison, so when you do this, you know beforehand that you risk having a miserable life, and that might deter you from doing it. So we send him to prison, I don't know why her to prison, not for her, but for all the rest that didn't do that yet. That's the way I understand it.
Well, most probably it's a mix of both.
Yeah. So hold on. I propose now, let's take 10 seconds of silence, if you agree, and think, where are we now? The 10 seconds are done when you say so.
When you say so.
Okay.
Where are you now? What's present for you?
Yeah. So I'm sitting in my chair and I'm wondering how deep do we want to go and how wide do we want to go? Because as I said, I'm curious about something totally different, which is now that we touch the surface of this thing, you're a facilitator of a group, and I'm curious about you personally. Like, I'm curious about how much energy does it take and give you? What's your vision? Stuff like that. So these are the two paths that we can go.
And I'm happy to follow. So I agree that this is not an interview.
Okay.
So I'm very happy to follow.
So before we follow, where are you in the conversation we had so far? Like what resonates in you? Like, does it make any sense?
It makes sense to some degrees. So I do see the value of, or what I'm taking away. Let me put it this way. What I'm taking away is the responsibility, the ability to respond, and how this can help to reflect on whether I want or I don't want to respond and take up this responsibility in the moment, to acknowledge my impact. And what is still open, and I wonder whether it's something that maybe just leave here to rest and pick it up another time, is the notion of indifference. So the notion that there is no sense, it doesn't make sense and nobody cares. And I think and maybe that's, I'm speaking here as an economist, there is something like a public good, and there's something like society, and I think there's something like collective responsibility. And in this sense, and there's something like ethics. So how do I want to behave as part of the collective? Although looking at the very big picture, I am insignificant. And I'm aware of my insignificance. And still I know that if everyone would act or not act as if they were insignificant, I wonder whether we would live in a better world or in a worse world. So if I wish to live in a better world, I wish to act as if I wasn't insignificant, although I believe that I'm insignificant. Doesn't make sense.
Yes. So let's continue there, if you don't mind, because there's a lot of really interesting stuff there for me. Make sense. You use the word, I wrote it down, make sense. You said nothing makes sense and no one cares. That was the phrase used. So make sense to whom? Because it makes sense to me and it makes sense to you, perhaps not the same sense. Because you are you're touching the leg of the elephant and I'm touching the trunk of the elephant, whatever. Only, by the way, there is no elephant, but don't tell anyone. So things do make sense, only they make sense to 3 dots. No one cares. Of course, everyone cares. And the problem is, I think, that people care too much. If there is a problem, it's this problem of caring. Because caring, I think, is the dissonance between what is and what you want to be.
Maybe caring is a form of numbing. Because if we care, it's almost like a distraction from our being.
Yeah, yes.
And
caring is to stop seeing what is and start looking at what can be.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that
optimism.
is. I don't know, optimism, if you think that things should be something, I don't know, it's a dissonance. Why optimism? Like when you see someone, a beggar in the street, yeah,
and if you
and you care, yes,
you see how it could be, how this person could be a person who doesn't have to beg because they have enough to eat. So there's some optimism there that you do see a better world, the possibility of a better world.
For me, it's not optimism, it's pessimism. The same as optimism, it's pessimism, right? Because you say, no, these poor people, it's 100, for thousands of years, there's still poor people. It will never be solved. This problem again, like it's you put the word problem on a situation, say it's hopeless. So I don't know, optimism or pessimism, both are a deviation from reality.
It's a judgment, yeah.
Yes, okay. And the third thing that you said is everything is insignificant. And in my world, the way I see things, it's not that I'm insignificant, but the fact that the world is ever changing and I'm a dancer in the world, the fact that there is no real viewpoint allows me as a game to take any viewpoint. I can now be the master of anything. I can now be the god of all things that exist. And now I can be nothing. I can be a grain of dust, like it's when I was a kid, I'm sure like a lot of people did this. I would close my eyes and I would imagine that I grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and the bed that I'm in grows big, and the whole world grows, huge. And then it contracts. Huge compared to what? So you can't have perception without a viewpoint. And if you realize that there is no the viewpoint, that everything is perceived from a viewpoint, you can, just for the heck of it, just for the fun, just so that life that we just described that is so boring because everything is predestined, whatever. So for the heck of it, you can change perspective.
Who comes to my mind is Quanita Robertson, whom I interviewed on the podcast. And she said that she enjoys the thought experiment, that instead of thinking of us being humans with sometimes spiritual experiences, what if we were spiritual beings with human experiences?
Yeah. And so it reminds me, I draw a lot, or I drew a lot, now I draw less. And I drew by someone who taught me how to see. And mainly I taught how to look by looking at negative spaces, by looking at things that have a shape but no distinction. And there is some optical illusion, quote unquote, of like a vase which is two faces, this, right? After practice, I can see both at the same time. So I can see both the old woman looking back and the young woman looking forward, or whatever. Like when you open your mind and practice, you are able to play with viewpoints and choose your viewpoints, and not let your viewpoints be automatic and vibrate you. Okay, so in this sense, again, when you say insignificant doesn't make sense, it assumes there's a viewpoint that says, from this viewpoint, this is what happens. As there is no viewpoint, you're free to choose any viewpoint.
Yes.
Okay, so I think that's it.
Yes, you're free to choose any viewpoint, which then refers back to the notion that happiness is not a state, it's a decision. Because
I
you
don't
can,
know. Yeah, I would say it's a choice.
yeah. What's the difference between a choice and a decision?
Perhaps a decision is an action, and a choice is more subtle. But perhaps a decision. Why not?
Mm.
By the way, I think it's neither. Happiness is a word, and words are elusive.
And words create worlds.
Yes, and by not defining your state but letting it float, your experience is much richer.
It depends. I think it really depends. What I experienced and learned is by having a wider vocabulary of naming how we feel and making sense for our emotions. It makes it easier to feel it and to accept it. And I think it really depends on what kind of person you are and what your needs are. Some of us are very sensitive to feelings and to sensations, and others not so much. And for some it helps to label it, and for others it helps not to label it.
I understand. And I say that it's like crutches. How do you say it? Like it's a scaffold. Mm-hmm. So words can be scaffold, perhaps. Mm-hmm. There's a like you start by knowing nothing, and then you learn a lot, so that at the end you know nothing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Dunning-Kruger, basically.
I don't know. Yeah. Okay. But in this end, now in this conversation, I don't know if I'm happy or not. It's not. If I say I am happy, I flatten where I am. Not only flatten, I make it constant. Like if I'm happy now, then I don't have to look at my happy meter for the following minute or second, whatever, because I already know that I'm happy.
And is happy is only one of many emotions.
Yes.
Is happiness really the goal?
And again, the goal
and for me, it's a good one. Makes me realize that I used happiness as one emotion out of 82, according to Brené Brown, to just state that it is our choice.
I just finished that book. I just finished that book.
Yeah, it's fantastic, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And I can choose. Well, I'm parallel to the Atlas of the Heart. I'm reading Behave by Robert Sapolsky, a evolutionary biologist from Stanford. Fascinating. And it's very interesting because on the one hand, yes, we can choose to feel certain emotions, or we can choose, and that's why for me, here we go. I'm thinking out loud. Happiness is more than just an emotion. So I'm not talking about happiness. Am I happy now in this conversation? Yes or no? No, I have different sorts of emotions. But happiness as a state of being. So independent of how I feel right now in 5 minutes, am I content? Or what is my state of being as happiness as opposed to miserable? Because what Robert Sapolsky says in the book is that there's so many hormones and neurotransmitters and whatsoever that also impact the way how we behave, because it impacts how we perceive the world, that at the end of the day, it's not only our So the instant reaction is not our choice, but I think the overall state of being can be a choice. Does it make sense? I was rambling.
No, it makes sense, and like now I think, do I understand the word choice enough? But there's also the story that I think I told you last time as well, that there is someone famous in Israel who was a prisoner in the Russian gulag for years, and he said they could put me in prison, but they couldn't take away my freedom.
Mm.
I am the owner of my freedom. I am the one who defines whether I feel free or not. I own this, and this ownership they can't take.
Mm.
So it connects to this. But I wanted to say something about the use of words like on emotions, whatever. I don't believe in a lot of rules, like universal rules. Okay? One rule that I feel very connected to, that I feel is true, is that whatever we resist stays, and whatever we accept changes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this connects also to labeling. So like the classic story. Okay, so I have a pain in my toe. I bumped my toe. I say, this hurts. By saying this, I stop listening to the toe because the signal is so strong. I stop listening and I just label it as it hurts. And then at some point I forget this label and I look at my toe and I say, now it doesn't hurt. What happened? Okay. But for the whole while, if you would ask me 2 minutes after that, how do you feel? I would say my toe hurts without checking, does it still hurt? And if I would check and not label it as hurt, but as feelings, I would see that I feel in the toe a very warm sensation on the left side, and now it shifted to the right. Mm-hmm. And now but as I block it and label it, the label remains. And this is why, in my theory, people are much more miserable than happy. Because when you're miserable, you resist it and it stays. And mm-hmm. when you're happy, then you accept it and it
flows.
fleets.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think it is something that is so deeply rooted in our instincts, because whatever hurts is a signal that we might die, so we need to pay attention in order to survive. When we feel good, no actions needed, all good, we are safe. So it will pass. And that's also why I think it's where the danger comes in. And I have this from time to time, that I read it, and since then I'm aware of it, that the feeling of overly excitement and anxiety physically feels the same. So when I have good news and I get very excited, I feel so excited that suddenly I'm afraid that I feel anxious and I cannot move anywhere. While if I would label myself, oh, I'm excited, I'm happy, I would go outside and dance. If I tell myself, oh, I'm anxious, then I hide in a corner and cry. So I think it's the awareness that our body tries to protect us. Okay. Oh, my toe hurts. Oh, it could kill me. Does it kill me? No. Oh, so I can let go.
Okay. So I have something to say about this. We are creatures that evolved in some, we have some history, right? If we would just not label anything and just sit and stare, and we say, oh, what a nice patch, and it becomes bigger and bigger, and it occupies, the tiger will eat us. So we have to label the patch and decide automatically what to do, because otherwise we will lose 2 seconds, and we won't survive to pass our genes to the machines that behave like us, but a little bit better, a bit more adapt. Okay, so this is our history. Currently, a lot of the things that are in our machines don't serve us, because to be stressed about a tiger and to be stressed about the test that you have tomorrow and you didn't study requires a totally different bodily reaction, because a tiger appeared much less often than the stressors that we have today, and our body gets exhausted, and our evolution is not fast enough to follow on this. Okay, yes. So now the question is, and of course the answer is, it's up to you, what is our purpose? Is your purpose now as an individual to act according to the rules that are embedded in your system in order to survive?
That means reproduction.
What?
Which means reproduction.
Yeah, so perhaps reproduction, so maybe, but what I'm saying is the rules that are embedded in you in order to survive don't serve you now that well, because when you tap your toe, you know that you won't die from it, right?
And if I open an email, I also know that I won't die because the email is not a tiger.
Yeah, but still, this reaction of panic from the set of pixels on the screen is automatic, is part of what saved you from the tigers that don't exist now or exist in the zoo. No, very insignificant. So this is one way that we can choose to behave. It's a choice without choice, by the way. It's the default choice. Like, it's a choice of that you're not conscious that you make, right? This is how. Or we can choose to override these systems, because as David Eagleman, I love this book, he said, our brain is totally elastic. What we teach it to do, it will do easier and easier and easier. So if the stress doesn't serve us, we can teach ourselves not to stress, because by the way, the people who we were born with from thousands of years ago didn't have pixels, and if they would see this email, they wouldn't react like you do, right? These are cognitive things that are not embedded in your genes.
And even if you open the same email, it would not stress you. And then we're back to the meaning we are giving and the care we are putting in.
Yes. And the thing is, and this is what I want to say, we can control this interpretation.
We can learn to control.
Yeah,
we can ultimately control.
Yeah, we can practice controlling this if you want. And practice makes better. I don't know perfect, but because what's perfection? We'll open another thread here and
then we're back at square one.
Okay, so but for this we have to first take ownership of us. Say, the reason that now I look at the screen and I see something that I know is Myriam is my decision. It's me who owns this thing that I project to be out of me. It's inside me. There was a lovely story that I read once. someone took, perhaps it's not true, but it's still beautiful. Someone took people who lived in the jungle all the time, and they took them out of the jungle, and they saw on the hill cows, and they said these are small dogs, because they never perceived things so much in the distance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when you look at the cow, especially me, because I have one lazy eye, when you look at the cow, can you perceive it as a small near object, or is it impossible for you? And can you practice this? Because it's interesting. If your goal is not survival, but we go back to the beginning, but facilitation. Because to facilitate, it's useful to take ownership of what you see.
And to be in control and to what you react.
I don't know, control. I would prefer to say take ownership.
Mm.
To be responsible, to say, this is a cow, but I also accept that it's a very small dog, or a huge thing that, I don't know, a dinosaur, a strange dinosaur, which is much further away, or a space around that the cow doesn't exist. In fact, it's the space around that creates it, or I don't know, or it's something in my eye. All of these are possibilities. And I take the one that resonates best with what I feel is right for the moment. I don't erase all of the possibilities except for the automatic one. Unless I'm in a survival mode. If I'm in a survival mode, it's a cow and fuck it, and I don't need to look at it anymore, because there's tons of other dangers around. So I labeled it, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. So what does it mean?
So you see, you have an assumption in your sentence.
What does it mean to you?
To me, if we take it to where we started, the quest is to, before you facilitate, to touch the thing that you facilitate. The thing that you facilitate, is everything, is the universe. Okay, like there is the question that sometimes people ask, what's your purpose in life? My purpose in life, my automatic response is to increase harmony in the world. Okay, to increase harmony in the world, by what criteria? By my sensing of it. So in this sense, I am insignificant because I'm in service to the world, and I'm the only thing is significant because I am the interpreter of everything that happens. And these two, just like the vase and the two faces, exist at the same time. There's no conflict between the two. I am a grain of dust and I am the universe at the same time. Okay, and from this perspective, I feel more comfortable facilitating, if you want, because I trust, first of all, whatever happens, happens. So I'm not busy thinking, did I do the right thing or not? Because whatever I did is the right thing. It's okay. And two, I see much more possibilities. By the way, I'm thinking now, the faces and the vase is like being able to listen to the meaning of my words and my voice and the spacing and my face at the same time. And when you see that there is a dissonance between something there, then you say, this is interesting. Let's poke this one. But if you are not able to as a practice, see all of this as one, then you miss tons of the potential to change.
Yes. By definition.
Mm-hmm. So that was the, I don't remember what was your question, but that was the answer. What does it mean, right? That's what you said.
Reminds me of the 42. So what was the question again?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. And I guess we leave the mystery of you and the community for next time.
Yes. Thank you for your curiosity.
Yeah. You're welcome. And thank you for inviting me. I think there's not a lot of people who I feel I can talk to in this level, like in this level of consciousness. It's not a judgment, but like in this level of abstraction. Do you feel we talked about facilitation because this is a facilitation podcast?
Yes, on a very abstract level. And I enjoyed the meta. And I'm curious to hear or to sense how the audience would reply for that, if at all. So an experiment.
We'll see what happens.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Okay.